Wiping out South Africa's trade with Britain, a post-Brexit recession, EU punishing the UK for wanting to leave, the rise of racism under Theresa May. What is the real impact of Brexit today and tomorrow? Well, 3 years after voting to break away from the European Union, the British are still dithering over the terms of their exit from the EU. Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit deal has been rejected by Parliament twice. As the EU's 29th March deadline looms, we speak to Britain's High Commissioner to South Africa, Nigel Casey. So dramatic stuff there, but, you know, that's what everyone's talking about. You also hear mad, loony, are these guys crazy? I mean, historically, it's probably going to be, have one of the biggest blips on your radar. What are we looking at the moment?
Look, Jane, first of all, thanks for having me on. I think the first thing to say really is I know this is confusing. In fact, if you're not a little bit confused by now, you're probably not focusing hard enough. It is a complicated picture. Brexit's very complicated, but to try to simplify it and get to the heart of it, we took a decision in a referendum in 2016 to leave the EU. It was a narrow but decisive vote. The big question since then has really been, are we going to leave in an orderly way or a disorderly way? And the government has been very clear that we wanted to leave in an orderly way because a disorderly Brexit would be very damaging.
It's an orderly way and in a disorderly fashion, isn't it?
And orderly means leaving with an agreement with the European Union, our friends and partners, with whom we are going to be close neighbours and close partners for years to come. Now, the government spent 2 years negotiating such a deal. There is a deal. It's been agreed by the 27 other EU heads of government. And the real question now is whether our Parliament is prepared to ratify that deal. As you say, it's been rejected twice. The Prime Minister has now made clear that it will be brought back to the House of Commons for a third time early next week, ahead of the European Council next Thursday and Friday. If Parliament passes the agreement, then the Prime Minister will ask for a short extension to our negotiating period to allow us to pass all the necessary laws to implement that. If Parliament rejects it for a third time, then she has said that it's likely the EU will offer instead a longer extension to allow us time to reflect and think of whether there's another alternative that can command support. I mean,
it still burns the brain, doesn't it? I mean, there have been so many changes and so many different votes, and I'm just going to quickly throw forward very quickly about what the options are for the Brexit process, and I'm just adding to what you've already said. The British Parliament votes to delay Brexit. If the vote fails, then the UK will have to leave the EU without a deal by the 29th of March. If it passes, then the UK will seek an extension from the EU for more time for a deal to be agreed on. If that happens, there could be yet another vote, or Britain could renegotiate a deal with the EU. It could even hold another referendum on exiting the EU. If there's no resolution, there could be a vote of no confidence leading to fresh elections. That could spell the end of moves to leave the EU. What I really want to know is, we've done the minutiae now, why can't politicians agree to move forward, to put everybody out of this misery? I mean, what is holding them back?
Look, we had a referendum which asked a simple yes/no question: do you want to stay in the EU or leave the EU? And the vote was to leave the EU. It didn't ask people what kind of relationship you want with the EU, and didn't ask about the manner of our leaving either. Those questions were left for the government to make the best of, and the government has done that. But this is an issue which continues to arouse strong passions. People have strong contrary views about it, and the purpose of our parliamentary democracy is to try and reconcile those. And I'm personally not at all surprised.
I mean, one thing very quickly, I mean, it has been wonderful watching democracy there. The fact that actually you are allowed to debate and you can do it without being thrown out of Parliament.
It may look messy to the outside, but I'd far rather have that than authoritarianism any day, and I know every South African watching would feel the same.
Okay, so we've been hearing about these ominous-sounding tariffs. How is it going to affect business from the UK's point of view and South Africa? Because particularly car exports would be...
So, look, our starting point has been, first of all, do no harm. Avoid any disruption to our existing trade with South Africa and its neighbours. So, in practice, we've spent the last year and a half trying to replicate the existing terms of EU-SACU trade in a UK-only replica agreement. We're very nearly finished with that. We're about 98% done. And I very much hope that in the next day or two that will be finished in time for it to be ratified by your Parliament before it breaks up for your general elections.
So Brexit won't sink us?
So we're putting that contingency plan in place in case the worst happens and there is a no-deal exit on the 29th of March. I do think that is the least likely outcome of the current process in Westminster and Brussels. For the reasons I mentioned earlier, I think it's much more likely there will be a delay now, either because the agreement has been passed by Parliament and we need a bit more time to implement it, or because we need more time to rethink. The least likely outcome, given that Parliament has overwhelmingly said it does not support the idea of a withdrawal without a deal, it is least likely that we will go down that route. So I'm reassured that in respect of our trade with South Africa, we won't have a problem, but we want this insurance policy, so it's important to get that done. We did publish yesterday a schedule of what our tariff schedules would look like were we to leave on the 29th of March with no deal. And if you're a South African exporter, there's lots to give you reassurance in that, particularly if you're exporting wine, zero tariff, fruit, zero tariff, fruit juices, zero tariff, vegetables, ditto. Okay. There are some areas, cars you mentioned, beef exports, which Botswana and Namibia sends to the UK, where there would be a tariff. And the reason for that is that if we didn't have a tariff in place, our own domestic farming industry would be overwhelmed by cheaper imports from the rest of the world.
Okay, Nigel Casey, we're going to have to leave it there. Hope for everybody's sake that it's resolved soon.
Thank you.
Still ahead, the drama and planning ahead of the elections here. The IEC is meant to keep the peace and steer the parties into smooth waters. Can they do it? IEC chairperson Glenn Mashinini joins me in the studio.